changing your ERP is like heart surgery on your business. It's not easy. You don't do it for fun. It's very painful. And what usually happens is you find yourself with that core ERP, which has some limitations. You've built all kinds of systems around it, whether it's spreadsheets or other reports or best of breed applications that bolt on. And then at some point you look at it from 30,000 feet and you go, you know what? It's time to consolidate some of these functions and applications.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Demand and inventory planning is a dark art that even trained S&OP practitioners struggle to understand. Each company goes through a maturity curve as they scale their operations. They will start with a spreadsheet or a combination of a spreadsheet and an ERP system. They might also do a lot of planning inside the ERP, but the development of those reports could be costly, and your planners may still not like to use it due to the rigidity of the ERP systems. As they grow, they need a sophisticated planning system that can talk to the ERP back and forth. In today's episode, our guest, Russ Graf, shares his insights on the inventory maturity curve for manufacturers and distributors. He also discusses how the inventory and S&OP planning differs for manufacturers and distributors. Finally, he discusses how the ERP systems might not have all the datasets the planner need to compute safety stock. Let me introduce Russ to you. Russ is a 35-year veteran of the ERP marketplace, 25 years as a value-added reseller of ERPs, followed by 10 plus years in the ISP ecosystem of cloud solutions that bolt onto ERPs. He is currently leading channel management at NetStock, a global fast growth demand planning application. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Russ, welcome to the show.
Hi Sam, how are you?
I am wonderful, and I am so excited to have you just because the kind of background that you bring from the inventory perspective, and that is always the biggest challenge for the manufacturers and distributors. Just to kick things off, Russ, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus?
Sure. Yeah, I've been in the ERP space, accounting software and operational software for probably close to 35 years now.
Yeah.
Started out in a small business in a CPA firm, working with their clients, helping them, advise them on some of their, back in those days in the mid 80s, PC choices and accounting software to help them run their businesses. And over the years, that grew into a pretty much a full-time consulting effort on my part, and worked with a couple of different firms. And then in about the mid 90s, decided to start my own firm and hung out my own shingle and aligned with a couple of software packages that I was a representative of, and started selling and installing and training and supporting those applications, and grew that first business to an exit, and sold it, started another one and grew it to an exit. And so long time in that environment. And then after about 25 years of that, jumped over to the ISV side, the independent software side of the fence, still in that ecosystem, but then selling applications that bolted onto those ERP systems, which were products that I had sold to my customers prior. So I got to know them, got some relationships there. And so the last 10 years I've been on that side of the fence, and the last 7+ years been with NetStock, which is focused on inventory replenishment and optimization and demand planning, forecasting type of functionality.
Okay, amazing journey. So a lot of exits there. Obviously, this has been really exciting journey for you. So obviously, we are going to dig into all of that. And we are also going to be talking about all of the inventory problems that you have been resolving for your clients. But before we do that, we have one of the standard questions that we ask every single guest. And that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
Yeah, my perspective on growth, and of course that's a very broad subject, right? So I think the way that I look at it is that if you're not growing as a business, you're probably falling behind, right? If you're standing still, falling behind because your competitors are not standing still.
Yeah.
So to me, growth is an imperative. If you want to survive and thrive, you have to be growing. You have to always be thinking about how I can improve my operations, my results, et cetera. But I think the other aspect of that is why is not so much the importance of growth, but what does that do for me, right? What is the impact of that growth? And for me, a lot of that just comes back to people, right? As I was growing my own firms, I wanted to be able to continue to grow so that I could offer more opportunities for my team, personal growth, professional growth, financial growth, all the things that we could do as a result of that growth in the business cascaded down to my team. So for me, it really always comes back to people and the opportunity to really have an impact on people's lives.
Okay, amazing perspective there. So, we are going to dig right into the inventory maturity topic there, and I'm pretty sure you are going to have a lot of different stories that you might be able to share. So maybe talk about, 2 or 3 different types of businesses and talk about their maturity, where they were, what they were doing, how their processes were, and, what they need to do to sort of go to the next step. I don't know if you have some sort of stages that you like to talk about when you talk about the inventory maturity curve.
Yeah, it's a concept that we are promoting within NetStock on a regular basis, right? I do a lot of webinars and presentations to different groups, users groups, and community groups, and so forth. So we think a lot about that because no matter where you are on that curve, there's always room for improvement, right? So what we start with is, and when we talk to a new prospect, that's really our first effort in our qualifying questions and discussions with them, if you will, is, okay, where do you stand now, right? What are you doing today? How's that working? What are the impacts of what you're doing? What's working? What's not working? What's the implication of that? What's that cost you? And so forth. So I think in terms of a self-assessment for any business, that's really where it needs to start as well. And so we have a lot of those conversations with our prospects. And what we often hear is that they're either leveraging their current ERP application, which has some limitations. Maybe they're writing custom reports and doing some business intelligence efforts with that data, or they're dumping data into an Excel spreadsheet and trying to build their own models for figuring out what to buy and when to buy it and how to balance their inventory levels. And so that's a certain level of maturity on their growth curve, right, with managing inventory. And then we try to talk about, okay, so what's the next step? Right? What else could you be doing if you had better tools? And of course, the NetStock application is a tool to help you try to move along that curve. And like a lot of software applications, there's initial functionality that moves you forward quickly. But then as you peel away the onion, you get into some depth. And as you continue to grow and leverage the functionality and capability of a system, you hopefully always find more depth, more that you can do, more that you can wring out of that application investment that you've made. So it's an ongoing process for us, right? We've got a lot of consultants on the team and training modules and so forth built to help people continue to gain depth of understanding and greater improvement and move them along that maturity curve. So whether you're starting at spreadsheets and custom reports, and then finally getting to sophisticated algorithms and sales and operating planning processes internally in the organization, more collaboration with your manufacturing teams and so forth, all those are steps along the curve that we try to help our customers get to in their own proper time.
Okay, amazing. So do you have any specific examples that you might be able to share of a customer? So I know that, they are probably utilizing the ERP, maybe doing the planning on the spreadsheet, but what are the core challenges? So maybe describe the business a little bit, describe the business model, what kind of products are they selling? What are their fundamental challenges as far as their inventory planning goes? And what are the implications when we talk about either, making money or losing money?
Sure. And I think you could probably think about it in terms of pre-COVID and since COVID, right? To some degree, because the challenges have just gotten so much greater and exaggerated with the challenges that we've had through to economic lockdowns and so forth. But supply chains have always been disrupted. It's the nature of the beast. And so you've always had to have an environment that was that you understood to be dynamic and volatile. And so visibility and the ability to be nimble in dealing with that volatility has always been important. So I can think of, many distribution businesses especially are pretty clean and a clear fit for us. They've always had challenges in lead times, managing their supplier performance and understanding what they need to buy when.
Yeah.
looking at standard disruptions like, Chinese New Year or European holidays
Yeah.
in the month of August and anticipating those kinds of disruptions. Obviously, there's always been climate issues, right? Hurricanes that shut down ports or earthquakes in a manufacturing location that you may have.
Yeah.
So there's always that unexpected disruption that you have to manage and deal with. And so visibility is such a big key, and accuracy of the data that you're analyzing, right? If the data is not accurate, then you're going to make bad decisions already. And people are already making these decisions, right?
Yeah.
When we talk to an existing a prospect for us, they're already making buying decisions.
Yeah.
It's just a question of what are the data points that they're leveraging, what are the tools that they're using to give them those answers.
Yeah.
So we've had lots of businesses that started on that spreadsheet environment. In fact, if we show up sometimes at trade shows and conferences with a button that says "ditch the spreadsheets" as our hashtag on the button, right?
Yeah.
So that's a typical environment that we're replacing, is people that are trying to do it through a semi-manual process on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And when we move them forward to a more automated tool, we see immediate results. All right. They get much better analysis, much faster analysis. They don't spend their time extracting the data. They now can spend their time analyzing the data and making decisions on what we provide to them. So there's a huge productivity gain almost immediately. And then they can start asking themselves more difficult questions, right, that they never had time for before.
Yeah.
And so you see growth in that collaboration and their accountability within the organization.
Yeah.
Since COVID, I think we've seen, some different challenges, right?
Okay.
And we've really had to help our customers move from a certain level of maturity using the application and kind of going along on an everyday basis to say, okay, we just got completely disrupted.
Yeah.
I have no idea what my supply chain looks like right now. I've got to change my model. And so, extending our forecast horizons, tweaking some of the levers within the application to help them understand where their opportunities are for adjustment, alternative vendors perhaps coming through different ports. So we've had to do a lot of things, change their replenishment cycles, buy more frequently, perhaps to be able to, which may not be economically as beneficial, but gives them the ability to be more nimble when they see what's happening in the marketplace. So we've had lots of those kinds of discussions, and we have lots of examples of customers that have thrived as a result of that, of visibility, as opposed to those that haven't, that weren't prepared for the extreme challenge that we face.
Okay, so let's say if I'm the manufacturing or distribution executive, obviously, Russ, you have been doing this for a while. You have sold so many different businesses. You know a lot. Okay, I don't know as much. So let's say I have my ERP, I have my IT team. They say that they can do things. Now, I don't know how good they are at doing things. For me, I am trying to understand more from the business perspective. So let's say, you mentioned a couple of things such as, changing the replenishment cycle or changing your planning horizon. So why is it so difficult to do this in case of an ERP? And you said that, it's going to be really difficult to do it inside ERP because they are not really designed for your forecasting and planning. But break it down a little bit more. Maybe tell us a detailed story of the manufacturing organization. Describe specific challenges from the user perspective, how their user journey were, how much time they were losing, what were they doing, what were they losing overall from the forecasting perspective.
Yeah, well, I think one of the big challenges with just a standard ERP approach is that not all the data that you need is present, right? You need to do some external calculations and create some new data points, such as calculation of a proper safety stock or buffer stock, right?
Yeah.
And that safety stock needs to accommodate risk factors in the supply chain, both on the supply side and the demand side.
Yeah.
So on the supply side, I may have suppliers that are not managing to their lead time properly, or they're short shipping product.
Yeah.
So I might get a report out of my ERP that can tell me that. And we've had manufacturers certainly have quality ERPs that give them some information as to when a PO was released and when it arrived and what the actual lead time was, et cetera. But now to translate that into a risk factor that impacts my safety stock calculation is a next step of capability, right? It's a next step of maturity, if you will.
Yeah.
That is typically not in the ERP itself. So you've got to extract that and do your own calculations on those.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that yourself, that takes time. You've got to grab the data, do the analysis, test it, and so forth. If you're using a tool that's built to do that, it's purpose built out of the box to address that problem right out of the box, then you're going to get instant results and answers and and a data point that now lets you make business decisions quickly.
Okay, so when we look at these, ERP systems, and you said that they are not going to have as much data that you are going to be requiring to build
Sure.
these models and to be able to predict whatever you are trying to predict from the inventory perspective. Would it be because maybe they are using an incorrect ERP? Again, I don't know. I mean, see, every ERP system there is probably going to claim that I can do anything and everything for you. But then once you start using it, and then you sort of realize that no. It's way too hard, way too expensive to do these things inside ERP. Now you need 15 different, more tools, even though it is called an ERP, which is supposed to be just one tool for everything, but you are not able to do it all. So what has been your perspective? Is it really the misaligned ERP that they are using underneath, and that is the reason why they need another tool on top of that? Or the majority of the ERP systems are not really designed for planning and forecasting, and you definitely have to have another tool?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and really gets to the nut of the problem, because there's a lot of great ERPs that do a great job of that core functionality, right? The general ledgers are very powerful and strong. The operating systems are very strong in terms of managing transactions, capturing all those transactions, all the ins and outs and so forth. But they can't be all things to all people. There's no way that they can get into the depth of domain knowledge in all different areas of the organization, especially in the middle market where we work, right? Now, I can't speak to some of the larger big enterprise applications like SAP and Oracle and maybe JD Edwards and some of those applications. That's not where we play. NetStock gets up every day believing in our mantra, which is that small, medium-sized businesses deserve the tools to compete. That's what drives us every day, right? That's our why, if you will. And so in those organizations, there's hundreds of different ERPs. They're all very capable in many, many ways. We find most businesses don't leverage ultimately everything that ERP has to offer. Right. In my experience as an ERP reseller and consulting firm, we were often frustrated by our customers' lack of ability or lack of willingness or lack of time to really dig in and wring out all the capability that ERP had to offer. But even if they did that, you would find shortcomings in certain key areas. And one of those, I think, is in demand planning and forecasting. You're not going to see a tool with sophisticated algorithms and some of these risk methodologies built into it like you can with a best of breed application that we bring to the table. So I think in the middle market, certainly people tend to hang on to their ERP longer than they should as they grow. Right. We find lots of folks with QuickBooks and products like that are fabulous applications for what they do, but they tend to hang on to them too long. And the reason is that changing your ERP is like heart surgery on your business. It's not easy. You don't do it for fun. It's very painful. And what usually happens is you find yourself with that core ERP, which has some limitations. You've built all kinds of systems around it, whether it's spreadsheets or other reports or best of breed applications that bolt on. And then at some point you look at it from 30,000 feet and you go, you know what? It's time to consolidate some of these functions and applications, get a better core ERP and minimize the amount of best of breed apps that we need to have. And so then you see that, that progression from maybe a QuickBooks to a NetSuite or an Acumatica or a Microsoft, whatever it might be.
Okay, very interesting. So let's talk about the inventory planning overall. So, not every organization is going to be equally mature overall in terms of their understanding of the inventory processes, even though they might feel that, I am doing everything right, but they don't know how much cash they are really sitting on in keeping that inventory. In fact, I'll tell you one story related to one of the companies. They wanted to actually work with different consultants, but they felt that, I cannot afford to hire these consultants because we are not as big. They were roughly at, $45 million range. And then when I asked them, okay, how do you plan your inventory? They said, we don't worry about planning. We simply overstock. Just don't want to plan. We have too much cash. That was the point that this person made. We have too much cash. That's why we are overstocking the inventory. So it is sort of counterintuitive. So at one instance, you are saying that you don't want to hire consultants who can fix these problems for you, but you are simply overstocking because you don't know how to plan. So when you look at different businesses, so can you talk about maybe different industries or different sizes of the businesses, and what are their very specific problems that you typically see when they start forecasting? Do they not understand what kind of formulas they should be using, what kind of algorithm they should be using? Do they not have all of those variables incorporated in their planning? So can you tell us some more stories, the kind of,
Sure.
problems you see in your space?
Sure. Yeah. One of our customers that I like to reference on occasion is a company out of Utah that does audio equipment.
Okay.
And they design it, they prototype it, but then they have the manufacturing done offshore.
Yeah.
And then the products come in right on containers.
Yeah.
And they've got a certain niche that they built in terms of that audio for outdoor applications and different environments.
Yeah.
And so they had a nice growing company.
Yeah.
Nice business with a warehouse, some talented people.
Yeah.
And they had built this monster spreadsheet, right, to help them track the hundreds of SKUs that they had built.
Yeah.
And manage. And so there was some seasonality that they were dealing with.
Yeah.
Some of their products being outdoor speakers, they would sell more in the summer months than in the winter months, right?
Yeah.
Some logic to that. So they were dealing with some of those challenges, and it had a decent ERP system that was providing some good data, right? So that's a really classic, typical environment. When we had the opportunity to work with them and implement our application for them, they immediately discovered what they probably already knew in their gut was that they had too much inventory on hand, that they could be leaner, better. So within the first year, I think they freed up almost $1 million worth of cash that had been sitting in the warehouse. And that's a success story in itself. But what's more interesting and important, I think, is what the multiplier effect of that freed up cash is, right?
Yeah.
They were able to take that money, and they had, probably a dozen other projects that were on the to-do list that they couldn't get to for lack of budget.
Yeah.
And in some cases, lack of time, because they were spending all their time messing with spreadsheet numbers, right?
Yeah.
So now they free up this cash. They're able to go and build new products, do some new R&D, innovate, and go to market with some new applications for those products that now allowed them to leapfrog their competition.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of freeing up the cash and putting it in the bank, but it's now what can I do with that to drive other profit generating activities in my organization.
Yeah.
And with the time that I freed up from not having to mess with spreadsheets half of my day, I now had the ability to build better relationships with my suppliers. So that company now has grown through acquisition. They're probably 5 times the size they were when we first became their customer. They've actually changed ERPs in the process and brought us along in that process, right? We continue to have them as a customer, and we just bolt into the new source of data. So that's a really solid success story that I think we've repeated hundreds of times across our user base.
Okay, so very interesting. Obviously, you have done something good, and that's why they, brought you along when they changed the ERP. Great results there.
Yep.
But what I'm really interested in knowing is what were the specific problems that resulted in that $1 million saving? So can you go, 1, 2, 3 level deeper in terms of, what was the core challenges there?
Well, and I think you referenced it in your earlier question, right? When you don't have a good understanding of what the proper safety stock needs to be, which means when you don't have a good understanding of what your risks are in your supply and demand environments, then your tendency is to overbuy, right? Because what I can't do is run out. So if I don't really know by a policy, by intentional understanding what my safety and buffer stock needs to be, then the tendency is to overpurchase. And now I've got all this excess inventory sitting on the shelf gathering dust and costing me money. So I think that's really the core problem is a lack of understanding of the risk methodologies and what the impact of that is on a proper safety stock calculation so that I can manage and purchase products at the right time in the right quantities based on good analysis of lead time and what my demand forecast looks like. So I think that's really the next layer down is that safety stock calculation.
Okay, amazing. Do you have any other stories that you might be able to share related to, I know that this is probably going to be related to just the safety stock calculation that they didn't really understand.
Yep.
What was the right calculation for the safety stock? And it's probably going to be an ongoing process. Once you try different things, then you are going to, figure this out. And, that's how you are going to save the inventory. I don't know if you prescribe based on your tool, are there any specific methods that you should be analyzing very specific KPIs, monitor something and then monitor this for, let's say, a couple of months and then figure out, where your saving opportunities are going to be. So I'm still looking for, some sort of a story where you might be able to talk the formula in detail that, you are the manufacturing executive, but you were doing the calculation wrong. Maybe you did not accommodate the vendor risk, or you did not accommodate the planning at the SKU level. You were probably planning at the category level, and that could be the reason why you were, or maybe the way you sort of, categorized your SKUs, they were not right. So I don't know if you're going to have any other stories in the other industries that you might be able to share where you see this problem more commonly, that the inventory planning is just slightly more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, I'm hampered a little bit, Sam, because my role in the organization is not, I'm not working directly with end users once they're implementing, right? We've got a team of coaches and consultants that work directly with our customers every single day. So I kind of hear the story secondhand.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit massaged already by the time I get to it.
Yeah.
I mean, so I know the success stories that we have and that we hear about. You know, we had one company that just had implemented our application just prior to COVID hitting in the UK.
Yeah.
And their feedback to us was that during that entire disruption of supply chain, and they in fact developed a product for personal protection and so forth, which became hugely in demand, right?
Yeah.
They supplied the National Health Service in the UK, which is the health environment, the medical environment. So they had huge demand. And through all that, they missed one delivery through all of the initial COVID shutdowns. And they've told us that they could not have possibly achieved that level of success for their customers, right? Delivery of product, critical product for their customers, if they hadn't had the visibility that our application gave them. So I hear those kinds of stories secondhand and at a second level, but I don't get into what exactly generated that result. But clearly, sophisticated algorithms on the forecasting side drive a lot of that, and the ability to evaluate how well those forecasts are actually performing. Right. So it's not a set it and forget it type of environment because it's so dynamic. So as we predict what that future demand is by aligning some sort of a forecasting algorithm against their historical performance, we want to look at that every month and say, is that still valid? Right. What did reality actually produce versus what we expected? What was that variance? Therefore, how much risk did that create? Therefore, how much of that risk needs to be handled in the safety stock? So a lot of it still comes back to that safety stock, but there's so many layers to that, right? And so understanding how the forecasts actually perform in real life, because they're never going to be accurate, right? They're a best guess. They're never 100% right. So how close are we getting? What's that variance and what's the risk as a result that I need to now accommodate in my other planning activities? And a lot of that, and what we're seeing in the middle market, Sam, also is that because of COVID, there's an appreciation for the importance, the critical nature of supply chain planning in middle market businesses that probably wasn't there before. I've talked to a lot of consultants and practitioners in business that say there's a seat at the table now for many people that wasn't there prior because there's a greater appreciation for how critically important this is. And that if I don't have my finger on the pulse of all the things that are going on, and if I'm not part of the conversation and building consensus amongst all the different constituencies in the organization, then I'm going to miss a perspective that's critical to me, right? We've got finance people, I got sales and marketing people, I got operational people that are all having this understanding and conversation around what can we produce, what can we deliver to our customers, what do we need to do to get that to happen. And in many cases in the middle market, the actual buyers and supply chain planners were not part of that conversation like they needed to be and like we're seeing that they are now. So I think that's been a big culture shift.
Okay, amazing. And when you work with these customers, obviously, the retail planning is going to be very different. The distribution planning is going to be very different. And manufacturing is going to be a completely different beast. So from the planning perspective, do you see any sort of differences, or can they utilize the similar formulas that your distributors were using? Because they are going to have very different strategy overall, how they replenish, how they fulfill their warehouses. So in your experience, what are the differences that manufacturers should know as far as their planning strategy goes versus the distributor versus retail?
Yeah, well, there tends to be an additional level of complexity there, right? Because I've got bills of materials that I have to manage. So I might have demand at a finished good level or at a component level, but it's it's made up of components and raw materials underneath that, and that demand has to blow through down to those lower levels. So obviously in many distribution businesses today, there is some kitting and assembling going on. There's some value added that distributors are doing in that environment. So I might get down to one or two levels in terms of a bill of materials, but in a manufacturing environment, there's multiple layers. Some of those products might be outsourced, right? I'm sending product out to get powder coated or whatever it might be, heat treated, et cetera. And then it comes back in. And so there's accumulated lead times for each of those different processes. And all that has to roll up. So the manufacturing environment certainly adds multiple layers of complexity to the planning process, just because there's more moving parts. There's more layers to the supply chain. And so it takes a little bit more thought, takes a little bit more understanding of what that central warehouse distribution and what that web needs to look like in terms of all those components and raw materials. So it adds a layer of complexity and an amount of time to test and make sure that we've got everybody on the same page there.
Yeah. So when I talk to my customers, I see crazy scenarios, and I am pretty sure the amount of time that you have spent in the ERP industry, you are seeing similar crazy scenarios as well. And some of those crazy scenarios are going to be the manufacturing company is trying to somehow use the distribution ERP. And we both know, Russ, in our hearts, that when you are going to use that, sure, it's probably going to work. I mean, you can figure out how to make it work. But the biggest implications that you are going to see is going to be in your planning, because that was not designed for, if you're a manufacturer, then it was not designed for distribution. If you're a distributor, then it is not designed for manufacturing. And by the way, if you are doing both, good luck with that. Because then you are going to suffer a lot more. Most of the hybrid solutions that are going to be, they are going to be slightly more manufacturing centric. They are not going to be as robust in their distribution planning. So when you are working with these businesses, when they are completely off from their ERP perspective, now their planning variables are going to be different as well. So what are some of the issues that you have seen, and what do you guys do to make sure the planning is going to be accurate?
Yeah, and again, it's one of those cases where in the middle market there's a big difference to larger firms, larger enterprises that are really doing some very sophisticated manufacturing, right? So in many cases, MRP is the right approach for those larger firms with complex manufacturing. And then the role that a planning tool has there is really to provide a forecast and inform the MRP application what the demand looks like, right? So it changes the role of a tool like a NetStock in many cases when in a true manufacturing, robust manufacturing environment where a strong MRP exists as part of the ERP application, then just bring in some key data that informs that MRP process and facilitates that collaboration and conversation amongst those different groups that I talked about. In a middle market environment, many times people try to implement an MRP application and they're not capable of really managing it. It's actually overkill for their organizations, right? And now you've got this behemoth of application that nobody really fully understands, takes a lot of time to manage, and they're not really sure that the results that they're getting out of that are really applicable. We see a lot of abandoned MRPs in the middle market, and it turns out that they could have done just as fine a planning job with an external application like a NetStock to help them understand the supply and demand sides of things and not get bogged down in a full-blown MRP application. So there's degrees of complexity and levels of sophistication in all these different applications. And so the challenge becomes, how do I know, again, where am I on that maturity curve? What am I capable of? I know one of the things you talk about, Sam, and some of your other podcasts and presentations is you have your mantra of people, process, and technology, right? We absolutely adhere to that. And you have to understand, do I have the people on the team that can manage these tools? Do I have the right tools? And are the tools advocating for a best practices, understanding what the skills of my people are, right? All those things have to mesh and match up. I can have the most sophisticated, high quality software application, but if I don't have the right processes around it or the right people trained up and skilled up to be able to leverage them properly, then I'm going to have a failed system, regardless of the fact that it was a high quality software component, right? So you really have to match those pieces up together in terms of their level of sophistication and capability. And that's a process of continuous improvement. That's a journey that never ends, right? You get to a certain point and it's okay, now I'm going to go back and start over and think about, well, now what can I get better the next time through? Okay.
Have you come across any sort of horror stories which you found super amusing, as far as the inventory planning goes? Have you come across any sort of horror stories that you would like to share with our listeners so that they can probably learn how not to do inventory planning?
Yeah, I suppose there's quite a few out there, right? And the horror is in the results, right? When you see either a warehouse devoid of stock and you can't fulfill any orders, or conversely, you've got a warehouse overflowing with product, and obviously that balancing act hasn't been achieved.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what you see is there's a combination of both, but they're in a moderate state, right? Not an extreme state. If you're doing a reasonable job, you've got some product that's overstocked, you've got some product that's understocked and is at risk of availability. But for the most part, follow the 80-20 rule. Maybe 80% of your items, your SKUs are functioning properly, they're healthy, they're within their mins and maxes and so forth. So if you're outside those bands, then those are the evidences of the horror story. We certainly, I think the biggest horror story that I hear consistently is that one of the challenges with a spreadsheet is there's usually one individual in the organization that's the master of that spreadsheet, right? He wrote all the formulas. He figured out how to extract the data from the ERP system. And that person is a critical cog. And when that person gets sick, goes on vacation, or even worse, leaves the firm, there's nobody else left behind to understand what that spreadsheet did and how it worked and how to continue to manage it and leverage it. And so we do hear that story often. We have people call us and say, hey, we thought we were doing okay with our spreadsheet, but the MIT graduate that we had as an intern that built that for us got another job or left the company, and now nobody has a clue what to do with it. And we're struggling, right? So we need a better tool that's systemic, that can be trained and supported, and that multiple people can access and understand. And so that's probably the most common horror story is the monster spreadsheet that nobody knows how to run anymore.
All right, Russ. So that's it for today. Do you have any last-minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners?
Well, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, Sam, and I hope that provides some value to your audience. I appreciate the opportunity. I think, to me, it's just the world has changed and there's going to be winners and losers, right? And we're already seeing that. There's already empirical evidence that what COVID has done is that some firms have embraced it, have thrived in it, and have grown because of it, have learned from it, and are doing the right things to build their businesses. And unfortunately, there's other firms that were totally unprepared and have not reacted well that are not going to survive, or they're going to be greatly diminished. And so the world has changed and there's going to be winners and losers more dramatically than ever before. That's always been the case, but it's been exaggerated. And, our hope and goal and people we work with, and just in general in the folks that are hopefully listening to this, we would love to have you be one of those that thrives, right? And we just, you need to embrace the journey, learn from it, come out of it better, and continue to grow.
Amazing. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be the inventory maturity is real. So at least know where you are on that curve,
right,
so that you can take the appropriate steps to be able to resolve that. If you don't know if you are going to be super content with the stage that you might be, that, I have too much cash and that's why I am stocking too much inventory, that's not a right situation to be in, and don't be in that. On that note, Russ, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode.
My pleasure. Thanks, Sam.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Russ, head over to netstock.co. It's netstock.co. He is happy to connect with other supply chain, ISVs, or ERP resellers, or other channel leaders. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with DC Spraglaw, who discusses why companies should spend less time worrying about forecasting accuracy and more on execution. Also, the interview with Marcia Williams, who discusses various components of MRP planning and where MRP fits in the process. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.